أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Our respected sisters and brothers in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to begin by first expressing my condolences to the Imam of our time and all the believers on the death anniversary of Bibi Khadija salamullahi alayha. Inshallah, towards the end of the speech, I'll mention some words about her. What I'd like to first do, inshallah, is to begin by reviewing one of the basic but important rules. Yesterday we talked about one of the rules that we have for how we know when something becomes najis, and we said that the default is that if we don't know, then we can assume that something is tahir. Until we are certain and we have knowledge about something being najis, then we can assume that it is tahir. So a question comes up, what about when it comes to prayer? How does this rule factor in particular when it comes to leather? Because one of the conditions that we have when it comes to prayer is that the clothing that we wear, whether it be pants, shirt, or whether it be like a belt, any item of clothing that we wear, that item should not be made from leather which comes from an animal that was not slaughtered according to Islamic guidelines. Meaning that we can't wear leather that is non-dhabiha, not that's from an animal that has not been slaughtered according to Islamic guidelines. So what does that now? If we're in a state of doubt with regards to leather, we said that if we have leather and we're not sure whether it's tahir or not, we're not sure that it's definitely najis, then we said that it's tahir. We can assume that it's tahir. What about when it comes for prayer? What about if we have doubt with regards to leather items when it comes to prayer? So first of all, if there's some substance and we're not sure whether this substance is like made out of genuine leather or whether it's synthetic leather, there's a doubt in our minds. In that case, we can assume that it's okay, it's tahir, and it's also okay for prayers as well too. Okay, if we're in a state of doubt in that sense. But let's say that no, we know that something is genuine leather, but we're not sure whether this leather comes from an animal which was slaughtered according to Islamic guidelines, whether it's been it's dhib shar'i, or whether it is just from another animal that wasn't slaughtered according to Islamic guidelines. In that case, what do we do? First, let me explain the viewpoint of most of the maraji, and then I'll explain the viewpoint of Ayatollah Sistani. His fatwa is a little bit different in this regard. Most of the maraji say that if you buy something and you don't know, like you get it from you buy it from the store. Okay, you don't know whether this thing comes from an animal which is slaughtered Islamically or not. in that case, you can assume that it's tahir, because you don't know. But you can't wear it for prayer. So there's a difference for most of the maraji. So if, for example, I have a belt, a leather belt, okay? I'm in a state of doubt. I don't know for sure either way. I don't know for sure whether it came from it was slaughtered Islamically. I don't know for sure that it wasn't. In that case, because I have that state of doubt, then I can assume that it's tahir, according to what we talked about yesterday. But can I use it for prayer? No, I can't use it for prayer. I have to take it off before the prayer. Ayatollah Sistani's opinion on this, however, is that if you are in a state of doubt, okay, you're not sure whether this comes from either source, in that case, not only can you assume that it's tahir, but also you can wear it for prayer as well too. I hope that's clear, inshallah. If there's a questions, then please feel free to approach me outside of the speech. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, now I'd like to once again take one of the traditions that we have from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam regarding fasting in the month of Ramadan. This one comes from the 6th Imam alayhi salam, who is giving us a criterion for how to determine who is good and who is not so good. So what does he say? He says that لا تغتروا بصلاتهم ولا بصيامهم. He says, don't be deceived by people's lengthy prayer or their abundant fasting. These are not valid criteria for determining the worth of an individual. Okay, and then he goes on, he says, فَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ. He says, indeed, it may be a case that a man or a human being becomes so attached to his prayer and his fasting that were he to stop doing them, he would be greatly disturbed. Okay, how often it's the case that somebody just does it out of habit, and getting rid of that habit would be something difficult. So what does he say? He says that وَلَكِنْ اِخْتَبِرُوهُمْ عِنْدَ صِدْقِ الْحَدِيثِ وَأَدَاءِ الْأَمَانَةِ. He says, test them when it comes to seeing how truthful they are in their speech and how prompt they are when it comes to returning goods that are entrusted to them, how well they keep goods and trusts that are given to them. So truthfulness and the restoring somebody's good that is deposited with them. These are valid criteria for judging the worth of an individual. What do we take from this hadith? We shouldn't take that the Imam na'udhu billah is putting down the value of prayers or putting down the value of fasting. No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying though is, first of all, there's a warning in there for us that sometimes somebody can get in the habit of doing these types of actions, the types of worships, and it's just that they're doing it out of habit. They're not doing it out of ikhlas. This is a lesson for us that we should try to do our actions out of ikhlas purely for the sake of Allah. We should think about why we're fasting. It's just because, oh well, my grandma fasted, and my mom fasted, and my dad fasted, and my grandpa fasted, and everyone in my family fasted, and I've been fasting since I was a kid, so I'm just going to continue fasting. Right? That's doing it out of habit. But the way to do it is to do it for the sake of Allah. Because Allah wanted me to do it, therefore I'm doing it. I'm doing so that nobody will make fun of me. No one will say that, oh, this person's not fasting. No. We do it because of the sake of Allah. And that's not it. That's not the only thing that determines who's a good Muslim. No, being a good Muslim involves other dimensions as well, including our worship. Being truthful in our speech. Right? This is what the Imams care about as well. That somebody should be truthful when they interact with others. And somebody who's truthful when they speak, everything else will also follow suit as well too. Even their actions, they won't just talk if they're talking to God and they're truthful, when they're saying إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, and they're truthful, then they would mean it. They would actually be doing that. They would be saying, it is you that we worship and it is you that we ask for help. Not that they're saying that and then in reality they're worshipping other things like clothes and fashion. And then the prompt return of goods entrusted in their care. They care about other people's rights as well too. These are valid criteria for judging the worth of somebody. Please say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. Brothers and sisters, until now we've covered some very important steps that inshallah we can take if we want to build and restore our families back to the Islamic ideal, building Islamic families. Some of those principles include having spirituality enter our lives and showing love to one another, and be searching for constructive criticism from our spouses and offering that as well to them. Now, in the last few days, we've been talking about faults and criticism, and maybe it took on a bit of a negative tone. So today we want to turn the tables and talk about something more positive. Today, the fourth step that we're going to, inshallah, be discussing is the step of being attentive to our spouses. Being attentive to our spouses. What does that mean? It means paying attention to who they are, what they do, what they like and what they dislike, their different various states that they are going through. Being aware of what situation they're in and what they're doing. Okay, this is something that you might think, okay, it's obvious, you're living with somebody, you're going to know what's going on in their lives, right? You're going to be aware of what's happening to them. But the reality betrays that. For many couples, for many families, it's not the case that even though they happen to be living in the same home, the reality and the state of what one spouse is in is completely hidden from the other spouse. Sometimes you hear stories, after 5 years, this is from a disgruntled wife, after 5 years, I tell my husband that, okay, let's do something special over the weekend. And he tells me after a couple of days later, okay, we're going to do something special, but I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to surprise you. And when it comes time, right, when the weekend comes along, he's like, okay, the surprise is that we're going to go to a baseball game. And she's like, after 5 years of marriage, he hasn't realized that I don't like baseball. Sometimes it's even worse than that. It's like the wife says that after 10 years, he doesn't even know my mother's name. Right? That's how clueless he is, right? But even on okay, those are extreme examples. But just being aware of what's going on, right? What our spouses are doing and what they're like. Sometimes we're so engaged with ourselves, with our careers, or when we get home, we're so occupied with TV, or even in some cases our children, that we forget to pay attention and to be attentive to our spouse. So, what are some steps that we can take in order to make sure that we do this? The first step is to know who our spouses are and what they are. Like sometimes, that period of finding out about our spouse, it's something that's limited, unfortunately, only to the time before marriage, right? And we're trying to scout out the other party, trying to find out what they're all about. But then after marriage, this process of discovering who they are, unfortunately, comes to a halt. While in reality, it's something that's supposed to continue. We're always supposed to be inquiring and finding about our spouse, asking how they are, what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their in their family as well too, right? Be interested and genuinely interested in who they are and what they're about, and having conversations about that. Sometimes the thought of being alone and conversing about something is scary for some couples. Because they're like, well, if we were to sit in that room, if I were to sit what would I talk about after all? What do we have to discuss, right? So we already talked about what the weather's like, and then what else is there to talk about? But that's because they haven't gone through this necessary process of identifying and finding out what each other are about. Okay, that's one step. Now, another very practical step that we can take, inshallah, this is something that we can act upon, is to get into the habit, if we're not already there. If we're already there, then we should be thankful to Allah and ask Him for His tawfiq and continuing to do this. To get into the habit of saying thank you for every single thing that our spouse does for us. Everything. Okay, whether it be small or whether it be large. Now, from the Islamic perspective, right, showing thanks to a fellow human being is something which we know about. Right? You've all heard about this, that this saying, "Man lam yashkur al-makhluq lam yashkur al-khaliq." Whoever doesn't thank the creation hasn't thanked the Creator. But that's not the only hadith that's reported in this regard. We have many hadith. I was surprised when I was looking into this how much emphasis there is from the Ahlul Bayt about making sure we thank each other for the good things that we do to each other. And especially now in the family relationship, in that marriage, where both parties are doing things for each other and serving each other, because that's part of what a marriage is about, then the thanks should be there even more. And we should make a point to say thanks. I said that we should do it for everything, whether it's a small thing or even a large thing. That comes to us from the Ahlul Bayt. Imam Ali Islam is reported to have said, Al-Karim, the one who is a noble man or a noble woman. Al-Karim yashkurul qalil wal-la'imu yukaffirul jazil. He says somebody who's noble will be thankful for even the smallest of things that somebody does to them. While the ignoble is somebody who denies and is unthankful for even the great thing that is done to him or to her. So we want to do this, okay? But it's not so easy. There's some barriers sometimes that prevent us from doing this. One of the barriers is that somebody, especially from the man's side, right? There's a certain sense of resistance to like saying thank you all the time, because after all, we want to be thinking efficiently. We're like, wait a minute, like, why do I have to say thank you every time? Because after all, once I said it once, then that should be enough, right? Like this one guy, he's like, okay, from the beginning, I'll just tell my wife, okay, that for everything that you've done to me until now, and everything that you will do for me in the future, I'm thanking you and saying thank you for that here and now, and then, don't expect me to say it again in the future. That's going to be enough, right? That's not how it works. Even, brothers and sisters, even these things that we think are insignificant, they have a place in the hearts of our spouses. Sometimes we think that, okay, we just said thank you for that same thing yesterday. It won't mean anything if I say thank you again. Actually, it does mean something, and it means a lot. Sometimes we're saying thank you for this thing, but you know what? That's what they ought to do anyways. That's my right, and they're just doing their duty. And why do I have to be thankful? Okay, so they got the kids ready. They helped drive them to school. All right, well, that's their duty. After all, I'm sitting there, I'm working, 24/7 to bring in money into this household, and she's free. What else is she supposed to be doing, right? But even for these small things, even when it's their responsibility, let's say it is their responsibility, even for that, a thank you needs to be said. Okay, we have an example, an inspiring example. Who is our inspiring example? Our inspiring example is Allah Himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the things that we're supposed to do is to emulate the attributes of Allah. And one of the attributes of Allah is that He is Shakir. He is thankful. Okay, we have this in Surah An-Nisa, Surah 4, verse number 147. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ما يفعل الله بعذابكم إن شكرتم وآمنتم وكان الله شاكرا عليما. Allah says, He's asked us in the form of a question, right? He says, why should Allah punish you? What reason does Allah have to punish you if you give thanks and you be faithful? Right? The punishment of Allah isn't something that He's just waiting so that He can, toss some people into hell. No. It's we ourselves who, with the exercise of our own free will, making the wrong decisions, we are the one who bring about punishment for ourselves. We're the one who turn ourselves away from the mercy and reward of Allah. He says, why should Allah punish you if you give thanks and you are faithful? Those blessings that Allah gave us, if we just put them to the right purposes, that's the way of being thankful. Why should Allah have to? If we do it for the sake of Allah as well too, and we be faithful, why should Allah punish us? And then He goes on to continue. He says that, and Allah is thankful and all-knowing. Allah is thankful for our efforts. Now, sometimes we read these verses, brothers and sisters, it's worth pausing a second and just thinking. Allah is thankful for something that we do. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing that here I am, everything that I have is from Allah. Right? He's the one who gave me all this guidance and all these promises of bliss and eternal happiness and success and proximity to the Ahlul Bayt and all the beautiful things I could possibly imagine. He put me on the earth for a short time for a test, and even there He gave me all these blessings, family, home, food, shelter, community, and all these things. And then if I do something with these, if I do the right thing with them, and it's not all that painful after all, then He's thankful for that. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. Imam Hussein alayhi salam picks up on this same theme on the day of Arafah. Once he's there on the plains of Arafah, and the day of Arafah is the time for talking to Allah, for expressing our needs to Him, making dua. We're told that in one such occasion he was there and he was with his followers and he began to recite this supplication, and it was so profound that like after just reciting a bit of it, he had to stop and just cry. Tears were just pouring down from his eyes, and then after a while, then he continued. That supplication is known as Dua Arafah. And one of my teachers says that this dua is so magnificent that if you ever have somebody who's a little bit, in a state of doubt with regards to the existence of a creator, then let them read this dua, right? And see. They'll see for themselves. It will wake them up and they'll realize how much they owe their creator, that there is a creator and how much they owe him. In this dua, Imam Hussein Islam picks up on the same thing. He says, فَإِن دَعَوْتُكَ أَجَبْتَنِي. He said, Oh Allah, when I look back on my life, whenever I had any need and I earnestly called upon you, you were there for me and you answered me. وَإِن سَأَلْتُكَ أَعْطَيْتَنِي. And whenever I begged from you, you granted me. وَإِنْ أَطَعْتُكَ شَكَرْتَنِي. And if I obeyed you, then you were thankful to me. Allah was thankful to me. وَإِنْ شَكَرْتُكَ زِدْتَنِي. And if I was thankful to you, then you increased me in your blessings. Look at the beauty of Allah. Look at the way He operates with us. He's the one who gave us everything. It's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to obey Him and to worship Him. But even if we do our responsibility, Allah is coming and being thankful for that. So we have to learn some lessons from the way that Allah operates in the universe. We too, even for the smallest of things, even if it's their responsibility, even if what they did, they thought they were doing something, but they actually fell short in terms of our expectations, we should be thankful to our spouses for what they do. Please say salawat ala Muhammad. Now, when it comes to the way of being thankful, one of the ways, of course, is to say thank you. But in Islamic guidelines, there's other things that we're told to do as well too. One of them is that when we're thankful to another human being, then we should make dua for them. Now, isn't that beautiful? Like, not only am I thankful for my spouse, but I also make dua for them too. That's something that you're not going to find when you go to the bookstore and pick up any random book on family and marital relationships, right? This is something that's unique to the teachings of our faith. Make dua for them, pray for them as well too. Right? In some cultures, I noticed, for example, in my experience living in the Islamic Republic of Iran, that in that culture, especially among the elderly people, there's a habit of making dua for one another. Right? Whenever you do something, they'll pray for you. It's a beautiful Islamic concept that they have taken and made part of their culture, that it's very common that they find people praying for each other. Maybe they had it here once upon a time as well too, where people would say, God bless you and these type of things, right? We, living here, we need to make this part of our culture as well too. Why don't we say God bless you, right? There's nothing non-Islamic about it. In fact, it's very Islamic, it's very appropriate that we should pray for somebody else when they do something good for us. So we mentioned one practical way, brothers and sisters, for how to let our spouses know that we're attentive to them. Another very practical way is to praise them when we see them doing good things or we see good things in them. All right? To let them know that that's something that we find praiseworthy and actually say that, hey, that's something good and it's something nice that you did. Now, there's some barriers that prevent us from praising. For example, let's say that when it comes time let's say that I'm a husband and my wife cooks me a meal. All right, this is something that it comes up all the time, right? She cooks. Now, when it comes time where I could potentially praise, there's some things that come to mind here. some type of, sort of insinuations and whisperings from the shaitan sometimes. Okay, if I praise her right now, then maybe she'll think that this food that she cooked is, that's the standard that I'm looking for. And then next time she won't go to take the extra mile to cook even something better. All right? So therefore I'm not going to say anything this time. I'll reserve my praise only for that special time when she cooks that special puri or that special naan or the special dessert. That's when I'm going to be praising her for her efforts. Okay? But no, we shouldn't think like that. Don't worry. She'll cook that special thing as well too. Praise her now for this and praise her even that time as well and add a little bit more extra, into your praise and she'll get the point. People aren't stupid, okay? They'll get the point. Sometimes it's some other barriers that prevent us from praising. For example, one of them is that, again, I get in the habit, I think that if I say it every time, then it's going to lose its meaning. Right? It's just kind of become a habit. And that's actually important, right? That it shouldn't just be the case that our spouse feels that we're just saying it just because. We should actually mean it when we say it. And so that what we can do is that we should make sure that the praise has actual meaning. We're praising something that's real. It's not that we're lying about it. No, it's not about praising something and someone for something and actually lying about it. That's lying is a sin. But praising and trying to vary it. Maybe today I praise for one aspect of the meal. Tomorrow I praise for another aspect. Now, another barrier that sometimes prevents us from saying praise of others is that sometimes people think that it's not Islamic. They say, no, it's not good to praise other people. Right? You've heard of this hadith, right? There's a hadith reported that you're supposed to throw dust in the face of the one who praises you. It's something that's quoted, right? So, what does that mean? I mean, why are you saying that we should praise, but then we have these other ahadith to say that we shouldn't praise? Actually, if we look at Islamic guidelines, there is no prohibition on praising. We see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran praises so many different individuals for different things. The Ahlul Bayt used to praise people. But rather, we have to look at the direction and the intention behind praising somebody. Sometimes people were being praised or are praised for ulterior motives or for worldly gains. Right? Politicians are praised for just so that somebody can get some worldly gain out of that, some political favor later down the line. Right? Sometimes people are praised and it's actually out of hypocrisy that they're being praised. That type of praise needs to be avoided. Also, sometimes we're going to praise somebody and we know that it's going to cause them to have ujb or takabbur. It's going to cause them to feel proud about themselves and think that, that they're a special worshiper of God or that somehow they're better than other people. Okay, that's wrong. That type of praise should be avoided. But praise, when it comes to encouraging somebody to do even more good, to continue to work on themselves, to improve themselves, that type of praise is not only acceptable, it's something that is good and should be practiced. So this is something, inshallah, that we can try to do. There's a couple of warnings, though, that I want to sort of add on to this. Okay, one of them is that even though we're talking about the importance of praising, okay, it shouldn't be the case that if I do something for my spouse, that I expect that my spouse is going to say thank you, or I expect that they are going to praise me. And if they don't, then I'm going to be shattered and disappointed. I remember, this happens, right? Like I remember I went to an auntie's house for a meal. And afterwards, I praised her for a particular dish. Because I know that when you just praise in general, it doesn't mean that much. But if you say something specific, then they really like it, right? So I went, and she said, "Oh, thank you so much." Alhamdulillah, she said, "Thank you." Then she went on, she said that, "You made my day. And if you hadn't said that, then I would have been really crestfallen, really upset." Okay? Now, the first part was okay, but the last part, that's not okay. We shouldn't do things like cooking or cleaning or serving or trying to dress up and look attractive for our spouses because we're looking for that compliment for them, even though they should be giving that compliment and they should be giving that praise. We should be doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have a general principle in the Quran that we have to remind ourselves again and again, brothers and sisters. Which is, in ahsantum, ahsantum li anfusikum. If you do any act of goodness, the reward of that is going back to you. It's for your own self. So if I'm serving in the center, I'm doing any type of community service, or I'm serving in the family, I'm doing my duty, I'm doing it to God. And it's from Him that I expect any type of reward that's going to come. That's one angle of looking at it, right? Another angle of looking at it is a bit more tawheedi. Okay, it's a little bit deeper. It's for those who are looking to get a little bit more in this month of Ramadan. Which is, okay, let me give you an example. Suppose that I've cooked this incredible meal, right? Incredible, like just, it's exact. I've been waiting for this to happen. After years of trying, it finally came out. I serve it, my husband or my wife eats this dish, and at the end, they don't say anything. They just go to sleep, okay? Now, from a tawheedi perspective, I need to ask myself this question. In terms of percentage, how much was the success of that meal related to my efforts versus all those other causes and effects that were taking place in order for it to turn out? Right? Those of you who ever cooked anything, like cooking from what I understood of cooking, it's really a matter of just throwing a few things together, turning on the heat, and then something happens. It just turns out. And that process of something happening is something which is beyond me. Somebody else is taking control of that. Somebody else has put these laws into motion, which makes this certain flour, when mixed with this yeast, rise at a certain temperature. Even this, for example, this flour that I'm using to cook this cake or this roti, right? This flour itself, how much effort has been put in by others to take the blessings of God and until they got into my home and into my cooking dish right here. Right? I'm just an insignificant speck in the entirety of events that took place in order for this dish to take place. So do I even have the right to expect any praise for that? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, brothers and sisters, just to summarize, today we talked about the principle of being attentive to our spouses. Number one, of being aware of them and learning about them, learning about their likes and their dislikes, their states, and being aware of their conditions, and showing that we have that awareness. How can we show that? We mentioned two ways. One of them is by being thankful and appreciative, making dua for them as well too. And the second one was by praising them and complimenting them on what they do. This evening, we've gathered here to remember the demise of Hazrat Khadija salamullahi alayha. We see that Khadija was somebody who was extremely wealthy. We know her for that trait. Okay? But how is it that she got this wealth? We're told that she inherited a very large sum of wealth from her father. But historians say that her wealth was so much that she owned 80,000 camels scattered across the Arab world. Now you see this lady with her wealth. What happens is that when she proposes to the Prophet via this intermediary, the Prophet conveys to her that after all, I'm not a wealthy man and you are a wealthy lady. It's not fitting for a man in my financial status to marry the queen of the land. What is it that she says? She says, Wallah, I swear by Allah, Ya Muhammad, in kana maluka qalila famali kathir. If it's the case, O Muhammad, that your wealth is little, then you should know that my wealth is great. And whoever gives herself to somebody, how is it not permissible that she is not going to, how is it the case that she's not going to give her wealth to him? And everything that I own, how is it that I will not give that to you as well? No, I'm not going to prevent you from anything that I have. And this is the reality that she lived up to. Everything that she had, she gave in the way of the Prophet, in the way of Islam. But this lady was not just a successful businesswoman. She was somebody who had a very elevated status in the eyes of Allah. After all, she was the mother of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra. This lady, one time, we're told in a hadith that's reported from our fifth Imam alayhi salam. He says that one time he's reporting from the Prophet. The Prophet says that day that I went to the heavens and Jibreel was with me, I asked Jibreel when I came back, "Oh Jibreel, is there any request that you have for me? Anything I can do for you?" Jibreel says, قال حاجتي أن تقرأ على خديجة من الله ومن السلام. I have one wish, is that you send peace, send salam to Khadija on behalf of Allah and on behalf of me. So the Prophet continues, he says that when I met my wife Khadija, I told her, I gave her the message. Now look at, there's one thing to be greeted, have a special greeting from Allah and from Jibreel alayhi salam. But look at the response that she has. She says, Inna Allaha huwa salam, wa minhu salam, wa ilayhi salam, wa ala Jibreel as-salam. She says that Allah is as-salam, that's one of the names of Allah. And from Him derives all salam, all safety and peace. Wa ilayhi salam, wa ala Jibreel, and on Jibreel may salam be. So, when we see the Prophet grieving over her, this is not the grief over an ordinary woman. She was somebody who was an excellent lady. We see that one time he was crying over the death of Khadija, because he used to remember her much beyond Amul Huzn, the year of Huzn. And he's weeping over her, and he's with his wives. They get upset, right? They're like, why is it that one of them approaches him, she says that, she chides him, she says that, why are you weeping over this old lady? Why do you remember her so much? Right? We're here, right? Forget about her. What does he say? He tells her that if you want to know what's special about her, she believed in me when you did not. She accepted Islam while you still remained disbelievers. And she gave me a child while you remained barren. Khadija was somebody who was very special in the heart of the Prophet. And because he weeps, we also should weep as well. When we're told that when Fatima Zahra, she was a young child, only about 5 years old when her mother passes away. And in hadith we're told that after she finds out that Khadija is there no more, then she goes to her Prophet and she begins to just be near him. You know, a child who's distressed, they can't leave the side of their mother. But she doesn't have her mother with her, so she goes to the Prophet and she seeks refuge in him. And she asks him, she says, Abati, Aina ummi, oh my father, where is my mother? At that point, it seems that the Prophet doesn't have words to tell his daughter Fatima. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instead sends Jibreel alayhi salam to the Prophet. And Jibreel tells him that your Lord commands you that you give Fatima salam and you tell her that for her mother in paradise I have created a wonderful palace, and she is accompanied with Asiya and with Maryam, the daughter of Imran. When the Prophet conveys this to Fatima, then Fatima alayhi salam is consoled by the consolation of Allah. And she says, Inna Allaha huwa salam, wa minhu salam, wa ilayhi salam. Let us go down to Karbala. We're told that on the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein alayhi salam addresses the enemy army, and one of the arguments that he uses against them, he says that Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, will take account over what you have done to her progeny. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibna Rasulillah. صلى الله عليك أيها المقتول عطشانا. On the day of Ashura, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam sees that all of his companions and all of his family members have given their lives trying to defend him, he is now alone. He goes to the enemy army and he asks them, "Do you not know that I am the son of the daughter of the Prophet? Did you not hear the Prophet say about Imam Hassan and me, هَذَانِ سَيِّدَا شَبَابِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ, that these two are the leaders of the youth in paradise?" But they have no response for him. Imam Hussein alayhi salam hears a baby crying out of severe thirst. He turns back and he sees his young baby Ali Asghar alayhi salam. He goes and fetches him from his sister Zainab and he holds him in front of the enemy army and says, "Ya qawmi in lam tarhamuni farhamu hadha at-tifl." O my people, O people, if you do not have mercy upon me, then at least have mercy on this baby. After all, what sort of crime would a 6-month-old baby have committed? But this is not enough for those brutal men who are in that enemy army. One moment Imam Hussein alayhi salam is holding his crying baby. A moment later the cries have stopped. He looks down and he sees blood pouring from the arrow. He cries out, "Allahumma ahkam baynana wa bayna qawmin da'una liyansuruna faqataluna." Oh Allah, you be the judge between these people and me. They invited us and promised to help us. Now they are killing us. A voice is heard from the sky, giving consolation to Imam Hussein. "Oh Hussein, leave him. For him there is one who will take care of him in paradise. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ." We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts these small efforts, and we pray that the marhuma for whom the majlis has been sponsored tonight, marhuma Mu'inun Nisa Begum bint Qasim Ali Khan, that she receives blessings and comfort and elevation as a result of these efforts that we have put forth tonight. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts our efforts and guides us to what is true and what is right, that He helps us to make the most out of the time we have in the month of Ramadan, and that He helps bring us closer to the Ahlul Bayt so that we can appreciate their message and then act upon it. For the sake of this marhuma and for Ghazafar Ali Khan, Badarun Nisa Begum, Mir Koban Ali Khan, Shabar Ali Khan, Hajra Begum, Mir Alam Ali Khan, Riyasat Ali Khan, Chandi Begum, Haidar Ali Mirza, Muhammad Raza Ali Khan, Fatima Begum, Khatija Begum, all of your marhumin and marhumat, and all the marhumin and marhumat of all mu'minin and mu'minat, please recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Atasbiquha as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.